The hospital halls always smelled faintly of disinfectant, a sharp, sterile tang that clung to the air no matter the hour. It was the kind of smell that burned in your nostrils for a moment, then became background noise, like the low hum of fluorescent lights or the distant hiss of oxygen tanks. To visitors, that scent was reassuring. A promise of cleanliness. Safety. But for those who worked here, it was a constant reminder that beneath the fresh linen and white walls, life and death walked side by side in these corridors, and they weren't always polite enough to knock before entering. At the center of it all was Rebecca Hall. She was 37 years old. Senior nurse. 10 years on the job. Her colleagues described her the same way every time. Calm under pressure. Unshakable. She has this presence about her. Like no matter how bad things get, she's in control. It wasn't just her competence. Rebecca had an almost unnerving ability to comfort patients in their final hours. Families loved her. Doctors trusted her without hesitation. She was the nurse you wanted by your side if things turned bad. The one who would hold your hand, tell you it was going to be okay, even when it wasn't. But behind that warm smile was a secret. One that had been hiding in plain sight. Over the past 5 years, the mortality rate in her ward had quietly doubled. No alarms were raised. No emergency meetings called. Because the deaths never looked suspicious. Not at first. They came as rapid declines. Patients who, just hours earlier, were stable. Alert. Even cracking jokes with their families. And then, gone. It was the kind of thing that made even seasoned doctors shake their heads, staring at a chart they couldn't explain. Sometimes, they'd say, medicine just can't explain it. They were wrong. Rebecca's day always started the same way. She arrived 15 minutes early, never late, never rushing. The kind of punctuality that made supervisors adore her. She'd change into her crisp scrubs, tuck a few stray strands of hair behind her ear, and take a slow walk down the ward before the official shift change. It wasn't just habit. It was ritual. She'd scan each patient. Not just their charts, but them. Their breathing. Their posture. The subtle twitch of discomfort when a monitor beeped. She noticed things other nurses missed, or didn't think mattered. By the time the day shift clocked in, Rebecca already knew who was doing well, and who wasn't. Or rather, who wouldn't. It all began, at least on paper, with a man named Thomas Avery. 72 years old. Recovering from a mild heart attack. He was on track to be discharged in a week. No complications. No red flags. But on the third night of his stay, something changed. The night nurse, a new hire, found him struggling to breathe just after 3 a.m. His blood pressure plummeted, his oxygen saturation crashed. Code Blue was called. By the time the crash team arrived, Rebecca was already at his bedside. She was holding his hand. Whispering something no one else could hear. He died minutes later. The official report called it sudden cardiac arrest. Unpredictable. Unpreventable. But it wasn't the last time a patient in Rebecca's care would unexpectedly decline. Over the next year, it happened again. And again. Different ages. Different conditions. Some were post-op recoveries. Some were simply in for observation. But the pattern was the same, stable one moment, spiraling the next. It was subtle enough to escape notice. In a hospital, people die. It's not unusual. But statistics don't lie, and the numbers in her ward were starting to whisper. No one was listening. Not yet. If you'd met Rebecca outside the hospital, you'd never guess she spent her nights surrounded by death. Off the clock, she was quiet but charming. She liked strong coffee, long walks, and old jazz records. She had a tiny apartment filled with neatly stacked books, none of them medical. Crime novels. Historical biographies. She had no spouse. No children. A few acquaintances, but no one who could say they truly knew her. She liked it that way. The less people knew, the harder it was for them to see the cracks. One thing Rebecca excelled at, beyond her clinical skills, was reading people. She knew how to talk to grieving families, when to offer a hug, when to stand quietly and let them cry. She could disarm suspicion with nothing more than a tilted head and a soft, "I'm so sorry." It was that same skill that kept questions at bay for so long. No one questioned why she was often the one in the room when a patient took their last breath. No one asked why she volunteered for the difficult cases. No one noticed how often she stayed just a little later than her shift required. But someone would. And when they did, everything Rebecca had built would start to unravel. The thing about secrets is, they don't rot in the dark forever. Eventually, something, or someone, drags them into the light. For Rebecca Hall, that moment was closer than anyone realized. And when it came, it wouldn't just reveal the truth about the deaths in her ward. It would reveal the truth about her. The first person to notice something was a junior nurse named Carla Mendoza. Carla was 25. Fresh out of nursing school. The kind of nurse who still triple-checked every medication label, who carried a small notepad in her pocket and wrote down reminders in neat, blocky handwriting. She admired Rebecca Hall. Everyone did. Rebecca had been the one to guide her through her first week on the ward, steadying her trembling hands when she'd struggled to start in 4 on a dehydrated patient. She had a way of making you feel safe, even when you had no idea what you were doing. But admiration can be a dangerous thing. Because it makes you hesitate before you trust your own instincts. It started as a flicker in the back of Carla's mind. Almost every code blue in the past year had one thing in common. Rebecca was on shift. Not only that, she always seemed to be the one who discovered the patient in distress. She was never far away when the alarms started. Never too busy to rush in. At first, Carla told herself it was just coincidence. Nurses rotated shifts. Things overlapped. It wasn't unusual for the most experienced nurse to be at the front line when something went wrong. But coincidences start to feel heavy when they keep piling up. Then came that week. 3 patients died in just 7 days. All under Rebecca's watch. Carla was there for 2 of them. She remembered the first one, a man in his 60s recovering from pneumonia. She'd checked his vitals during her rounds. Everything was fine. He was even sitting up in bed, asking when he could go home. Less than an hour later, she heard Rebecca calling for help. By the time the crash team arrived, it was too late. The second was worse. A teenage girl. Car accident victim. Multiple fractures, but stable. Her parents had just left for the night when Rebecca walked in to check her 4-line. Minutes later, alarms blared. Carla was one of the first through the door. She saw the girl's face, pale, eyes wide, struggling for breath, before she went limp. That night, Carla didn't sleep. By the time the 3rd patient died, a 75-year-old woman with a broken hip, Carla's unease had grown into something heavier. Quiet dread. Rumors began to ripple through the ward. Some whispered that Rebecca was cursed, a dark cloud hanging over her shifts. Others said she just had bad luck, the kind that made you hope your name wasn't on her patient list. Carla didn't know what to believe. But one young resident, Dr. Ian Patel, wasn't content with rumors. Ian was meticulous. Methodical. He'd been in the hospital long enough to know when something didn't add up. And lately, a lot wasn't adding up. One night, after finishing his rounds, he stayed behind in the staff lounge, a stack of patient files spread across the table. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble has a way of finding people who ask the wrong questions. The pattern revealed itself slowly. Case after case. Different patients, different conditions, but one common detail. In the hours before each death, the patient had been given an injection of insulin, or potassium chloride. On paper, these medications weren't unusual. They were stocked on the ward, used for specific cases. But in these cases, there was no reason for them. No doctor's order. No chart entry explaining the dosage. And yet, there they were. Ian felt a knot form in his stomach. It was circumstantial. Flimsy. Without proof, it was only suspicion. And suspicion alone doesn't stop a killer, especially one who knows the system better than anyone else. Someone like Rebecca Hall. But here's the thing about suspicion: once it takes root, it grows. And Ian was about to find out just how dangerous it is to stand between someone like Rebecca and her secrets. It was the night of September 12th when Harold Myers was wheeled into room 412. 64 years old. Retired high school teacher. The kind of man who could make small talk with a stranger in an elevator and have them laughing by the second floor. He'd been admitted for observation after mild chest discomfort. Not an emergency. Just precaution. His tests were coming back clean, his vitals steady. When his wife, Marlene, kissed him goodnight, he was smiling. "You'd better bring me coffee in the morning," he joked, wagging a finger. "That sludge they serve here doesn't count." She promised she would. Rebecca Hall was on the night shift. By now, her presence on the ward was a kind of background fact, like the hum of the lights or the faint scent of disinfectant. No one thought twice about her making her quiet rounds in the small hours, clipboard in hand, her footsteps soft against the linoleum. At 2:13 a.m., Harold's monitor let out a long, piercing tone. Flatline. A sound that has the power to rip sleep from the deepest corner of the human mind. The code team descended within seconds. The air in the room filled with the chaos of CPR, the thump of compressions, the clipped orders, the hiss of the ambu bag forcing air into lungs that wouldn't respond. Rebecca was there already, one hand steady on Harold's shoulder, her face an unreadable mask. When Dr. Ian Patel arrived, his focus was on the patient, until something caught his eye. The sharps container mounted to the wall was nearly empty. Inside, resting at an angle against the red plastic, was a single-use syringe. Not one of Harold's prescribed medications. Not the right gauge. Not the right label. It was subtle. Anyone else might have ignored it. But Ian had been waiting for something like this. The code team kept working. But Harold's heart never came back. 2 days later, the toxicology report landed on Ian's desk. He didn't need to read past the first line. Potassium chloride, massive concentration. Enough to stop a heart cold. The hospital administration moved quickly, and quietly. They contacted law enforcement. Not with panic, but with precision. This wasn't something you confronted head-on. Not with someone like Rebecca Hall. You didn't accuse her. You set a trap. Rebecca, of course, didn't know the walls were beginning to close in. She walked the ward as she always did, calm, unhurried, a faint smile for every patient. She still volunteered for the difficult cases. She still offered to cover for nurses who wanted a break. From the outside, nothing had changed. But beneath the calm, something in the air had shifted. The trap was being set. And soon, Rebecca would step right into it. The trial drew national attention. News vans lined the courthouse steps. Camera flashes lit the marble facade like a storm. Inside, the air buzzed with a mix of anticipation and revulsion. People wanted answers. They wanted to understand how a woman trusted to heal could instead choose to kill. The prosecution wasted no time. From the opening statement, they painted a chilling portrait. Rebecca Hall wasn't a mercy killer. She wasn't ending suffering. She was addicted to the drama. The adrenaline of a code blue. The rush of being the hero in the room. The praise she soaked in when doctors and families thanked her for trying so hard to save a life she had already taken. She didn't just play God. She played the Savior. Over days of testimony, survivors took the stand. A middle-aged man described waking in the night to find Rebecca at his bedside, syringe in hand, moments before his body erupted in violent convulsions. A young woman, pale, voice trembling, told the jury how her mother's condition had been improving until Rebecca came in for what she claimed was a routine injection. Her mother was dead within an hour. Then came the families. Fathers. Sisters. Sons. They spoke of loved ones who had been chatting, smiling, even making plans for the future, only to be gone by morning. Some broke down mid-sentence, their grief still raw. Others stared directly at Rebecca, their silence heavier than any words. The defense tried to cast doubt. They blamed clerical errors, system failures, the chaos of hospital life. They hinted at the possibility of other staff being responsible. But the forensic evidence was unrelenting. The hidden camera footage. The medication logs. The toxicology reports. Piece by piece, the picture became impossible to deny. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach a verdict. Multiple counts of murder. Multiple counts of attempted murder. When the foreman read the word guilty, Rebecca didn't flinch. No tears. No visible anger. Just that same faint, unreadable smile she had worn on the ward. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Hall would never walk the halls of a hospital again. In the years since, her case has left ripples far beyond that one ward. Hospitals across the country have tightened medication controls, introduced biometric locks, and implemented real-time monitoring of drug withdrawals. Nurses and doctors are trained to spot patterns that might have once slipped through unnoticed. But even with safeguards in place, the haunting question remains. How many angels are still out there? Hidden behind warm smiles. Hiding behind the trust we give to those who are meant to save us. And if there's one thing Rebecca Hall's case taught us, it's that sometimes, the danger isn't in the shadows at all. It's standing right beside you. The trial of Rebecca Hall was unlike anything the county had ever seen. From the moment jury selection began, the courthouse transformed into a kind of stage. Television crews camped out in a permanent line along the sidewalk, their bright lights turning the courthouse steps into a strange mix of red carpet and crime scene. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of coffee and anxiety. Uniformed deputies moved with a watchful calm. Reporters whispered updates into microphones. Sketch artists sat hunched, pencils dancing across pads as if they were racing to capture history before it slipped away. Rebecca's arrival each morning drew an almost eerie silence. She would step from the holding room in a neatly pressed navy suit, her dark hair pulled into a simple bun. No handcuffs. No shackles. Just that same deliberate, measured walk she had once used when gliding between hospital rooms. To the untrained eye, she could have been a lawyer herself, or a senior administrator, here for a board meeting. But she wasn't. She was here to answer for the deaths of 38 people. The prosecutor, a tall man with a voice built for commanding a room, wasted no time. He painted a vivid picture for the jury, not of a mercy killer, but of a predator. This defendant, he said, pointing toward Rebecca without looking away from the jury, did not act out of compassion. She acted out of vanity. She craved the adrenaline of a medical crisis. She liked being the one who discovered a patient in distress, liked being the center of attention in a room full of doctors and nurses. Every syringe was a stage cue. Every code blue was her spotlight. The words landed heavily. In the gallery, a few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rebecca sat still, her expression unreadable. Over the next 3 weeks, the courtroom became a revolving door of testimony. There was the young man in his 40s who had survived, barely. "I remember waking up," he said, voice low but steady, "and seeing her standing there with a needle. I asked what it was for. She just smiled and said, 'This will help you rest.' A few minutes later, my heart was racing, and then, nothing. I woke up in the ICU 2 days later. They told me I was lucky." A murmur rippled through the jury box. Then came the families. A teenage boy, barely holding himself together, told the court how his grandmother had been laughing with him over a crossword puzzle the night before she died. His voice cracked on the last sentence, and the judge had to call a brief recess so he could regain his composure. Some witnesses were clinical. A toxicologist walked the jury through the lethal effects of potassium chloride, explaining how it could be masked by a sudden cardiac arrest on paper. A hospital pharmacist detailed the audit trail, every missing vial traced back to Rebecca's access card. But the most unsettling testimony came from a behavioral psychologist called by the prosecution. She explained, in calm, measured tones, the phenomenon of hero syndrome, where an individual intentionally creates a crisis in order to be praised for resolving it. "This is not about mercy," she told the court. "It's about control. About crafting a moment where you are indispensable, and being willing to harm or kill to create that moment." Rebecca's defense team leaned heavily on the chaos of hospital life. They argued that poor record-keeping, high turnover, and overworked staff could create the appearance of wrongdoing where none existed. They pointed to other nurses and doctors who had access to the same medication rooms. They suggested that the hidden camera footage could be misinterpreted, that syringes prepared in advance might be part of a routine emergency protocol. But each point was met with evidence that dismantled it. The logs. The toxicology reports. The fact that so many deaths occurred on Rebecca's shifts, far beyond statistical chance. Against the advice of some, Rebecca testified. Her voice was even. Her gaze steady. She denied every accusation. Said she'd been framed by sloppy procedures and opportunistic investigators. When asked about the patients who'd died, she said softly, "I wish I could have saved them. I did everything I could." It might have swayed some, if not for the prosecutor's final question. "Ms. Hall, can you explain why, on the night of Harold Meyer's death, you withdrew potassium chloride under the name of a patient who wasn't even on the ward?" A pause. Just long enough for the room to feel the weight of it. "I don't recall," she said. And in that pause, the air shifted. After 3 weeks of testimony and 68 exhibits of evidence, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the foreman read the word "guilty," there was no gasp from Rebecca. No shaking hands. No tears. Just that faint, familiar smile. The judge's sentence was swift, life without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Hall was led away, her steps unhurried, the same calm walk she had used for years in the halls of a hospital. In the years since, the case has left a permanent scar on the medical world. Hospitals nationwide overhauled medication protocols. Access to high-risk drugs now requires dual verification. Real-time audits flag anomalies within minutes. Many facilities began rotating staff to prevent any single person from having unchecked control for extended periods. And yet, for every system, there are ways to exploit it. In quiet conversations at conferences and over coffee in staff rooms, the question still lingers. How many angels are still out there? Smiling. Comforting. Waiting for the next moment to play hero. Because Rebecca Hall's case taught us something chilling. Sometimes, the danger isn't the shadow in the corner. It's the person holding your hand, telling you everything will be alright.